Sure, I'm testing the microphone. Hello. And they need to hear from each of you on the mic. So, Ora, if you want to test your microphone quickly.
This is a test. I'm Ora Houston.
And I'm Dwayne Lofton.
With a new form of government taking shape at City Hall and every seat up for grabs, Austin voters elected 2 new City Council members on November 4th and sent 16 council candidates, plus 2 vying for Austin mayor, to runoff elections. Tonight, beyond the rhetoric, we ask the remaining candidates what makes them the right person to lead their district and our city.
Support for Civic Summit comes from Google, a global technology leader focused on improving the ways people connect with information. And also by Texas Mutual Insurance, providing workers' compensation for Texas employers.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for Civic Summit, City Council Runoff Conversation District 1, a joint production of KLRU, Leadership Austin, KUT, and the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life. I'm Jennifer Staten with KUT 90.5, Austin's NPR station. For the next half hour, we'll be speaking with the candidates running in District 1. You can join the conversation by using the hashtag CivicSummitD1. District 1 is in East Austin. It's bordered by I-35 on the west, extends as far north as Howard Lane, and south to East 7th Street. The eastern border of the district is SH 130, with only a few areas east of there. It's the smallest district in terms of population. The residents are majority Hispanic, and Ora has lived in East Austin almost all of her life. She spent 27 years working at the Texas Department of Mental Health and Mental Retardation. She has also participated in many local organizations and commissions. Running against her, Dwayne Lofton. Dwayne is a native East Austinite and has also served on a number of Austin commissions. He's currently a senior deputy in the Travis County Sheriff's Office. Our discussion tonight will focus on leadership. So consider this kind of a job interview. We want to know what skills and qualities you would bring to Austin City Hall. Now, this discussion is not being conducted in an official, formal debate manner, but we are asking the candidates to be respectful of each other's time and to limit their answers to about a minute. So the first question, which was shared with both candidates before tonight, what have you learned about yourself over the past 4 months or so of campaigning that would help you govern? And Ora Houston, answer first.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here tonight and to have all the other people joining in on Twitter and hashtags and all that kind of stuff. I've learned several things about myself that will help me govern once elected to the City Council. And I think the most important one is that I don't require as much sleep as I thought I would. Because as we look at City Council meetings, obviously, you don't get a whole lot of sleep on Thursdays. So that's one thing. The other thing I think that I've learned is that I get energy from talking with the people who live in the district about their hopes, their dreams, their desires, and their concerns. And so that sense of energy is something that really connects with me. The other thing I think that I've learned is that I have a sense of place. I have a sense of belonging. Because I've lived in Austin for a long time, I know the history of this city. I know what's going on presently, and I believe that I can be a bridge to the future.
Dwayne.
Sure. You know, one of the things that I've learned is, you know, as elected officials, you know, we need to get out of our office. I've been in this community working for a long time, and, you know, I'm very familiar with the issues. But, you know, I have kind of what I call my take on those issues. And the one thing that I've learned in this process and, you know, having talked to a lot of people across this district is you know, you really don't always understand a problem until you actually get to see it for yourself, see it with your own eyes. And that's one of the things that, you know, I've learned probably the most is, you know, I need to get out of my office and, you know, drive around the district and actually, you know, put my eyes on the problems so that I better understand what's going on and have a better understanding of how we need to address that issue.
All right, so I want to give you a hypothetical situation we're going to talk about. So a developer is in conflict over a project with a local neighborhood group. The city staff prefers one solution, the neighborhood group prefers another solution. So I want to hear from you what skills you would use to resolve this particular situation, and really in general any other conflicts that are no doubt going to arise between competing interests and groups if you were in office. And Dwayne, if you want to answer first.
Sure. Well, this is a great question because I'm the president of my neighborhood association. And just a week ago, we had a development that went before the Planning Commission. City staff is recommending approval of the project, and the neighborhood is against it. And we went down there and made our case as to, you know, why we felt like the development wasn't good for our neighborhood. But the Planning Commission voted against us and approved it. And as a council member, how I would resolve, you know, that type of conflict where, you know, we have the city staff recommending and then the neighborhood opposing is I would look at, you know, one, you know, what is the neighborhood asking in terms of why they're opposing the project, and see if, you know, part of the reason why they're opposing this particular project is because it doesn't bring value to their neighborhood. And if it doesn't bring value to their neighborhood, I think I would be more inclined to side with the neighbors and oppose the project because, you know, at the end of the day, the developers that are coming into our neighborhoods and, you know, throughout this community and developing, you know, when that project is complete, you know, they get to go back to their homes, but the folks that live in that neighborhood are stuck with, you know, whatever that particular development is. And if it's something that they think doesn't complement their neighborhood, then, you know, in essence, you know, we are kind of penalizing them in a way. And so I would be very mindful of the decisions that I made, especially in conflicts like that.
Well, I would like to start the process differently. I would like to ensure that every developer has conversations with the community and the neighborhoods prior to any action being taken. Right now, sometimes we get ordinances and resolutions to direct staff to do something, and that doesn't really work well because then the conversation is about how do we stick to our guns or how do we stick to our guns, and there's no way to have real, true, honest dialogue. So I would like to put the process up and say, before you start this rigorous process, you have to have real heartfelt conversations with each other, and I'm willing to use my currency to bring that about and sit with people, and so they listen to each other about what the issues are and then start the resolution process and whatever the rest of the process is. I think communities find themselves feeling like they're being shot at, sniped at all the time because they don't have enough time to really engage the process in the development.
So we're talking at a civic summit, hoping to increase civic engagement by doing this today. I'm curious to hear from both of you. How would you work to increase civic engagement and interaction with your office? If you're elected, how would you sort of open your doors and encourage folks to communicate with you? Ora, if you'll take that first.
Well, as I tell people all the time, you know where I live and you know my phone number. So that's the first way you can always get me. Constituent services is really something that's at the heart of why people need to be engaged. They don't feel, as I've listened to them up and down the district, that anybody listens to them. So I would be very intentional about making sure that I'm out and about in the community, that I have meetings in the community, town hall meetings once a quarter, to talk about those issues that impact the quality of their lives. We've assumed that people in districts don't want to work with the city and don't want to help and understand they do. It's just that one way of messaging does not catch every demographic, especially in a district as diverse as District 1. So we've got to, as city staff, we've got to find new ways of engaging people. And again, I'm willing to have those conversations moved out into the neighborhoods.
Dwayne.
And I would also, you know, work to go out into the neighborhood and talk to the residents there in the district so that, we can hear firsthand, the problems that they see, the disconnect in city services. One of the things that I've found through this process is, the city assumes that they're doing a very good job of communicating information out as to why they do particular things. But one thing that I've done throughout this process is I've explained to folks like why the city takes certain actions or why the city can't take certain actions. And what I found is, like, once they realize, like, why the city is not responding in a particular way or why the city did respond in a particular way, that they have a better appreciation for the process. And I think, them becoming more informed will in turn make them more engaged. And so one of the things that I want to do is make sure that we go out and continually inform the public about why we take particular actions and make particular decisions so that, one, they know what's going on, but two, that they become more engaged.
So you've both worked to engage your constituents, open your doors, and hear communication. So I think we can assume that, your constituents will let you know when you've maybe made a mistake, when you're doing a good job, but probably let you know when maybe you've done something that they're not quite so happy about. What I want, though, is to ask about you yourself personally. What are your own personal benchmarks for whether or not you feel like you're doing a good job leading and serving? Constituents will say, this happened, this didn't happen, and I'm upset. But what about you personally? What are those benchmarks for yourself? Dwayne, if you want to answer first.
As being president of my neighborhood association, I've had the opportunity to, work on a lot of different things in this community. And so I do get that feedback from the people that live in our neighborhood. And, they tell me, when I've done a great job or when they think that, I could have done something better to advocate for them. But, at the end of the night, when I'm reflecting and trying to determine whether or not, I've done well, certainly to the extent of my abilities, I try and take in everything and just kind of look at the big picture. And, if I feel like, I've served them to the best of my ability, then I feel like, I've achieved what I set out to do. And, government and neighborhood work, it's often thankless. And so, you have to kind of look within yourself to get that personal satisfaction, because you won't always get that compliment from the people that you're serving.
Aura.
Well, most of my professional life, I've worked at the Department of Mental Health, Mental Retardation, and so public service is something that I'm accustomed to. And serving on the City Council would be just an extension of that. There's some core values that are internal to my campaign, that we will treat people with respect, we will talk in civil tones, we will return calls within 24 hours just to say we need more time to find the information. So again, it's that constituent services that I think will, if the numbers go up, then that says that we're not doing a real good job. If we have less of that because we're available, we're accessible, we're out and about in the community where people can pull us over and say, I don't like the way you did that, or I wish you'd done something differently. I think we can have some data to say that whether or not we're doing the good job. And if we're fair, we have to be fair and independent and not choose one side over another. So I think there's some intricacies of governing in this city particularly that will be some challenges, but I think that internally I'll know if I've stepped on the wrong way.
So, Dwayne, I want to follow up on something that you said in your answer and ask this of both of you all. So you used the word thankless at times to describe government and perhaps city service. So I want to hear kind of specifically from each of you why, given what we know can be the sometimes tough nature of this kind of work, why you want to represent District 1 in Austin at this particular time in the city's history. Aura, you want to take that
first? As I said earlier, there's that sense of place that I've lived in this district for such a long time. I love the people, I love the places, and when this came up about 10-1 and the opportunity to represent in a way that our district has never been represented before. The people in our district, the real people, have never had a voice when decisions are being made about the quality of their lives. And I want to represent those people, and I've been doing it for free for a long time, and I thought might as well get paid for it, right? So, but I think it's the people first. I think that my job on City Council is to be a voice for those people who will never come and speak, will never be on the 3-minute, citizens communication, who don't even know where City Hall is. So I have to be very in tune with what the reality for those people are, so that when we're having discussions, I can say, well, for some parts of my district, this is not going to work. And so I don't see it as thankless. I see it as a gift, and I'm looking forward to the next vision of that gift. Dwayne.
And for me, I've been serving this community now for over 25 years, serving in a number of different capacities on city boards. I currently serve on the Human Rights Commission. I'm president of my neighborhood association, and I'm also a reserve deputy with the Travis County Sheriff's Office. So, I've been giving of my time in this community, and the only reason why I do that is because I love Austin, and I love what we can become if we have the right people, in the right place doing the right things. And, this is an opportunity for us as a community to elect representatives that live in our particular neighborhoods to represent that neighborhood. And it's something that I've been doing for a long time. And so I see this as kind of a natural extension of what I'm already doing. And that's why I'm very excited to be a candidate in this particular race and looking forward to becoming the first office holder in District 1.
Now, Ori, you mentioned the new 10-1 system of city government that we have elected. And I'm curious to hear from you all what you think the biggest challenge to the city is going to be as we pivot to this new 10-1 system of government, what the biggest challenge is and how you would plan to face and overcome that challenge. Dwayne, you first.
Well, I think the biggest challenge is going to be everyone, because most of the people that are going to be elected in this initial term are all relatively new to city government. And so the biggest challenge is going to be just kind of wrapping their arms around all the responsibilities that we're going to have, building relationships among each other. Because for a lot of us, we didn't know each other before this process. And, I've been told by some of the current council members that, you really become a family down there at City Hall. And so, part of the challenge is going to be us developing that kind of family type atmosphere so that we all get along and we're able to function and govern together.
All right.
I think the biggest challenge for the new 10-1 system is that sense of inertia, that there's a window of time where we can actually pivot to more representative government in Austin and all that entails. And then there's also a window where we go back to, well, this is the way we've always done it. And that's a challenge for not only the power brokers in this city, it's a challenge for the new council, and it's a challenge for staff. Because as new people come in with new ideas about how city government should respond, then the staff has got to pivot too. We can't just think about the central business district. We now must consider what are the needs in everybody's district. And so one of the things that I think we spend the first so many days on as we, after sworn in, is to develop a culture about how we relate to each other and how we relate to the public and to staff particularly. And then one of the things that I've suggested is that we need to take a bus tour of everybody's district so that we know what their issues are, where they see their assets and where they see needs. And so then we get a better feel, because we are going to have to vote on those too. And so we have to know on a kind of superficial basis what the issues are in everybody's district.
Well, and that answer actually brings up another point about 10-1, which is that each council member will be representing their own district, but will also obviously be voting and deciding on things that are citywide issues. So what kind of skills and qualities would you bring to bear on making decisions impacting your own district versus sort of thinking about the city as a whole? How how would you balance those two? Dwayne, if you want to take that one first.
Well, I think we all will realize that, under this new district-based system, we're going to have to bring something home to our district in terms of addressing some of the issues that are very important to that district. But at the same time, realizing that Austin still has to continue to move forward and grow responsibly. And so one of the things that, I think will be very important for us is, making sure that we develop those relationships so that when I talk about, the needs in District 1, that my partner or, next person over in District 2 or 3 or 4, like they also understand that, this is a real issue and it needs to be addressed. And they will work with me to work on those issues as I will work with them to address the issues in their district. And then there's some of those overarching issues like transportation and affordability that are going to, kind of spread across all districts. And I think we'll all want to work on those collectively. So, I think there'll be a lot of opportunity for us to work together as a council on the big issues and keep Austin moving forward, but then at the same time, make sure that our district issues get addressed.
I see Austin as a big puzzle, and that the districts are pieces of that puzzle, and that we have to learn to fit together. That means that we have to dismantle some of the silos that we've lived in and worked in and are educated in for many, many years, and understand how we work together collectively. There's some large issues that, of course, we have to all talk about. Congestion downtown is one. Where we place jobs and economic development is another one. Escalating property taxes. Everybody has those issues in their district. So there's some very broad-based issues, but then there's specific issues to the district. When we talk with environmentalists, we talk about other parts of town, but now I have to say we've got a landfill out on 290 that's it's harmful, and we need to do something creative about not adding to it or mitigating it somehow. So this way, things that have not been heard of before throughout the city are now going to have a voice. And I think that that's how we begin to say, these are some things that are very critical to our district, but the over global kind of thing is something that we all have to work on together. And I think the tone of this first council will set that for everybody else.
So there will be a lot of new faces on this council, a lot of learning, sort of learning the ropes of just how city government works, also learning about issues, especially in the other districts. So each of you talk about how you would lead your constituents, lead your district, and get up to speed doing all the learning. How do you lead and learn at the same time? Ora, if you want to take that one first.
Having been a single parent, you do multitasking. That's what you do. That's what we've always learned to do, and that's something that that I will be able to do once sworn in January. There's some people that'll give you a little grace margin there, so that I can wait until February to talk to you about this issue. But there are going to be issues that are going to have to be dealt with immediately, and so that's where the staff comes in, because we've got to have some historic institutional memory. We don't have that, so we have to depend on staff to come in and prep us and brief us on things that are going to come up really quick and ask pertinent questions to help us understand it. I'm a very thoughtful person. I love to have different opinions, and so sometimes I get too many, but I think that makes me make decisions better by having a multitude of conversation about what the issues are. And so that's kind of how I think that I will manage that, is that we just keep moving and get data and information, and we make decisions, and or we punt down the road like we've seen happen already on the council.
Dwayne?
And I think my experience as president of my neighborhood is going to, really kind of get me up to speed real quickly in terms of, how do I lead and govern, because it's something that I've been doing for a long time. And so I think for me, a lot of, what I'll do initially is, start meeting with the new council members and introducing myself and trying to get to know them better and figuring out, what their style is, and so that, I know how best to communicate with them So when we start talking about, working through some of these issues, I know like the issues that are important to them, because in anything, it's going to take 6 votes to get something done. And so if I have already an idea of, the particular issues that are important to a particular council member, when I get ready to look for help to get something done, or even just, have somebody that, I can lean on for guidance, or just kind of another impression, or not impression, but another opinion. And like I'll already have, a lot of that. And so that's going to be a lot of what I'll do initially in terms of going forward and leading this council.
So we're already down to our final question. The time has flown by. So if I can get each of you to answer briefly at the end of your term, how will your constituents describe your leadership skills and qualities? What will they say about you when all is said and done? Dwayne, if you want to take that one first.
Well, I think the first thing they will say is I'm very fair. I'm easy to work with. I'm thoughtful. I'm hardworking. And, they will say, I believe that, I'm a great council member. And they would be proud to re-elect me to a second term.
And Aura?
I think that's what they'll say, is that, are you running again? Because we like the interaction with the community. You have an open door policy. You're thoughtful in your deliberations and the decisions and why you make certain decisions. I'm a curious person, so I'm always interested in why we're doing it this way instead of another way. And then I'm a courageous person, and they'll say that because I'm able to speak to the reality of people who have not had a voice at the council. So that's what I think they'll say.
And that is all the time we have for tonight. Thanks to both of you, Aura Houston and Dwayne Lofton. All of the runoff conversations and our conversations with the newly elected candidates for Districts 2, 5, and 9 will be available on YouTube. Early voting in the runoff election starts December 1st. Election Day is December 16th. For KLRU, Leadership Austin, the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life, and KUT. I'm Jennifer Staten. Thanks so much for watching.
Support for Civic Summit comes from Google, a global technology leader focused on improving the ways people connect with information. And also by Texas Mutual Insurance, providing workers' compensation for Texas employers.
I'm hanging around, man.
Okay.
Sure. Checking the mic. If you can just say something so they can check your mic.
Susana Almanza.
Also.
Sabino Renteria.
With a new form of government taking shape at City Hall and every seat up for grabs, Austin voters elected 2 new city council members on November 4th and sent 16 council candidates, plus 2 vying for Austin mayor.
With a new form of government taking shape at City Hall and every seat up for grabs, Austin voters elected 2 new city council members on November 4th and sent 16 council candidates, plus 2 vying for Austin mayor, to runoff elections. Tonight, beyond the rhetoric, we ask the remaining candidates what makes them the right person to lead their district and our city.
Support for Civic Summit comes from Google, a global technology leader focused on improving the ways people connect with information. And also by Texas Mutual Insurance, providing workers' compensation for Texas employers.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for Civic Summit, City Council Runoff Conversation, District 3, a joint production of KLRU, Leadership Austin, KUT, and the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life. I'm Jennifer Staten with KUT 90.5, Austin's NPR station. For the next half hour, we'll be speaking with the candidates running in District 3. And we invite all of you to tweet along with us. Use the hashtag CivicSummitD3. District 3 covers almost all of East Austin below 12th Street, extending all the way to Ben White Boulevard. It crosses I-35 at Old Torf and incorporates part of South Central Austin. The demographics are primarily Latino, with more than 60% of residents renting rather than owning their homes. Joining us tonight are 2 siblings running against each other to represent District 3. Susana Almanza calls herself a longtime community organizer. She's also an educator, mother, and grandmother. She served on a number of Austin boards and commissions, including Planning, Parks and Rec, and the Environmental Board. She's running against her brother, Sabino Pio Renteria. Pio also has a long history of community work in East Austin. For the last 30 years, he served on city boards and commissions. He currently serves on the East Austin Neighborhood Center Advisory Board. Thanks to both of you for being here. Now, our discussion tonight is going to focus on leadership. So sort of consider this kind of like a job interview. We want to know what skills and qualities you would bring to Austin City Hall. Now, this discussion is not being conducted in an official debate manner, but we are asking candidates to be respectful of each other's time and to limit their answers to about a minute. So the first question of the session, which was shared with both of you before, what have you learned about yourself over the last 4 months of campaigning that will help you govern? And Susana, if you want to take that one first.
Thank you so much for having me here. First, I want to say I'm not running against my brother. My brother's running against me. I announced in January and he announced in May, so I want to make sure that the audience gets that correct. I've learned many things. My leadership skills have been one. I actually went through Leadership Austin class, but I've also am the director of environmental justice organization for that for over 23 years. So that is a leadership in itself, to be able to administer a program, work with community members, work on policies, be involved at the city level, the state level, and the national level. That takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of research. It takes a lot of passion, compassion. It takes a lot of love of community. And I think that that is one of my most outstanding assets, is that I have a deep love of community. I have a deep love of justice and freedom and human rights. And I want to make sure that we all live in a fair and balanced society. And so I bring those skills to the forefront. Like I said, the knowledge, the experience, being a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, a sister, being a friend. And so those, I think, are leadership skills that I and many women and many people in today offer.
Pio.
Well, what I've learned in this campaign is that it is a lot of work. And I mean, I have all the respect for people that run for candidacy now, because it's a 12 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I love those I've done that all my life since I first worked for John Trevino, Gonzalo Barrientos when he ran for state rep the first time, and the second time, because he lost the first time, with Richard Moya, our first county commissioner. So I've been with I've worked for the leaders that have lived here in Austin. You know, I helped Eddie Rodriguez to get elected to state rep, Father J.B. McDeas for school board, Raul Alvarez for city council, and then Mike Martinez. But the thing is that I've learned to work with our elected officials and at the same time have listened to my community. You know, when I served on the Community Development Commission, we learned that gentrification was coming into our town. And I didn't sit there. I went and asked Eddie to help us on this issue. And he passed the Homestead Preservation Act, which our governor, Governor Perry actually signed it. You know, it's just amazing that he was able to do that for us. And that's one of the main things that I have always worked for our community, is for helping the people that are most need, you know, and that's why I've served on all kinds of city commission boards, and that's my passion is. You know, I worked 34 years with IBM and retired. I had a career. I have 3 beautiful children, 2 sons and a daughter, and 3 grandchildren. And my passion for the city has been so great. You know, I not only worked, you know, for a corporation like IBM, but also served, you know, in halfway boards. And I have always tried to go out there and listen to the people, and then go out there and see and try to find a solution to the problem.
All right, so let's dig into those leadership skills then a little more. Now, Pio, you said campaigning is a lot of work.
Yes.
So I'm curious to hear from each of you, when faced with a lot of work, campaigning is a lot of work, governing is a lot of work. As a leader, how do you prioritize? How do you decide what gets done first, what gets done second, who gets listened to first, who gets listened to second? Talk about how you, as a leader, would prioritize the big plate of work that would be in front of you. Pio, if you want to take that one first.
I was a past chair, and I'm vice chair of the neighborhood planning team, the Cesar Chavez neighborhood planning team. And, you know, we set up a system where we had nonprofits, we had business people, we had people of faith, we had community people, and we worked these people and welcomed them and made them feel like they had an input in our community. And we meet once a month. This has been a very successful program. The neighborhood planning teams has been a great program for our community there in Cesar Chavez, because we sit down there and we look at the problems and then have a solution, and we welcome all input. We don't decide that this is what we don't want. We sit down there and then we invite the community to come over and listen to what we're doing, whether it's a variance, or where there's a hotel that wants to be built there, or, you know, we have designated our entertainment district where they're on 6th and 5th Street. So those are the kind of things that, you know, we do, and I want to, you know, really work on that and expand it to the other areas, because I know we have it next to us, the Holly neighborhood. It has been trying for years to develop a neighborhood planning team, and it hasn't happened because there's a few people there that are constantly fighting, and unless we are able to sit down and find a solution, then we're never going to solve the problems that we're facing there in East Austin.
So Susanna, same question to you about prioritizing when you have a lot of work on your plate.
Well, work is something I've grown up with, and I'm accustomed to working. I come from a family where my father worked from the moment the sun came up to the moment the sun went down, and grew up with 10 siblings, so work is not anything that I'm afraid of. But I've been involved in 3 of the neighborhood contact teams: the Cesar Chavez Neighborhood Contact Team, the Go Valley Johnson Neighborhood Contact Team, and the Metropolis Neighborhood Contact Team. And I'm also part of the Raza Roundtable, part of ABLA, which is the business groups. And so I get to look and hear a variety of issues, where there's community issues, small business issues, citywide issues. I'm also part of the Austin Neighborhood Council, and so I look at a variety of issues citywide. And so looking at priorities, of course, I'm going to look at the priorities of District 3 first. And so looking at the priority of District 3, I've had focus groups, I've talked with community members, and so I know that the priority issues, one is affordability. That is a very big issue for the community. The next issue is job creation, a living wage of $15 an hour. Looking at health care and the accessibility of health care. Looking at transportation, that is a local issue, a District 3 issue, but it's also a citywide issue. So looking at alternative to transportation issues, and then education. Looking at the need, especially in District 3, since we've had so many low-performing schools, and we've had a population of adults who have limited education. So education is a big issue that we need to look at and address, looking at the priorities of District 3, but also looking at the common issues, because some of those overlap citywide, you know, transportation, affordability, job creation, a lot of those are citywide issues. So making that, finding common ground citywide, but also addressing the issues at the District 3 level.
Right, so I want to give you a hypothetical scenario where we're going to talk about sort of conflict and resolving conflict. So I'm going to give you a hypothetical first of all. So a developer is in conflict over a project with a local neighborhood group. The city staff prefers one solution, the neighborhood group prefers another. So I want to hear what skills of yours you would use to resolve, you know, this scenario, but also really any other conflicts that are no doubt going to arise between competing interests. So Susanna, if you want to take that one first.
Absolutely. You know, serving on the Planning Commission myself, I've had the experience of having developers come up with an issue, having neighborhoods come up with the issue, and being the president of a contact team and sitting on several contact teams, I also understand the perspective that's coming from a community issue. And so I look at, one thing is that you need to make sure that the developers have had those sit-down talks with the community. That's very important. We actually passed the East Austin Overlay Ordinance in 1993 to assure that people in East Austin had the same rights that people in West Austin, to sit down with the developers first, to discuss about what project was coming in, how would it benefit the community, was it something that the community want, was it something that the community would like to compromise on, so that it becomes a give and take issues. And so then at the city level, being able to look at those issues, did the developer have the conversations with the neighborhood, did the neighborhood agree that this is something they could live with, or something they could live in with maybe conditions, or it could be the neighborhood says, no, thank you, we don't want this. So I think having those skills and already being there on both sides of the table, in the city government and on the neighborhood issue gives me that ability to know that you really have to research those issues and you really need to look at the neighborhood issues. But more important is that you have to look at the neighborhood plans. What does the neighborhood plan say? Because people have dedicated years of their lives to making those neighborhood plans. And a lot of times city staff will come and trump, or city itself will trump the neighborhood plans, which I'm not very happy about. When people dedicate so much of their time and energy, are not paid or anything, but because they care about the neighborhood, and then all of a sudden to have their neighborhood plans disrespected or overlooked or trumped.
Pio, same question for you about resolving conflicts between competing groups.
Yes, you know, we go through this, you know, yearly, and for the last 14 years through our neighborhood contact team. As you might know, the Cesar Chavez Neighborhood Planning Team is right there next to downtown Austin. So we're one of the, we have more pressure on us of being developed than any other place there is. But, you know, we really need to just be really reasonable and compassionate about when we, the developers in the neighborhood, and just really say we're going to have a really serious sit down, and then look at the codes that really, you know, there's codes out there that tells you and let you know that this is what you can do. And it's very hard to stop those kind of developers that when they come in and they meet in all the rules and regulations, you know. And maybe you shouldn't have to go down and try to stop them. We should get something out of it. You know, when someone comes in with a mixed-use building plan, we should say, hey, listen, you know, the city says that you have to give us 10% affordability. Now, what else can you give to us, you know? So can we work with you to maybe instead of that 10%, we can say, why don't you provide 2 bedrooms instead of a 1 bedroom so that families can live, families can become affordable housing so that families can live in that. So there's a lot of leeway that we can work with developers. But, you know, it really comes down to is if the community really wants that. You know, our planning team, you know, we've been at it at 14 years now in our area. And we need to respect, you know, the planning team. The contact team that we have are very professionals. They include developers, they include business people, they include community people. And we want to be a big family. So if they want to be part of our family, they're in our community, then we can work and sit down with them. And that's what we do in Cesar Chavez contact team.
So your constituents will no doubt let you know when they think maybe you've done something that they don't like, when maybe in their eyes rather, you have not done a good job. So that'll probably be clear when that happens. But I'm curious to hear from each of you all sort of what your personal benchmarks are for whether you're doing a good job serving your constituents and leading your district. How do you sort of measure yourself in that regard? And Pio, if you want to take that one first.
Well, I measured it as, you know, when we leave the meeting, or, you know, people are not upset and angry and mad. You know, we need to sit down there and we do those kind of things. You know, I have to admit that, you know, sometimes I get things passed and, you know, later on I find out that something went wrong. You know, maybe I made a mistake. You know, I'm willing to admit that. You know, and there's sometimes when the other members say, hey, this is what we want, and we're going to, and it turned out that, yeah, that's what happened, and it worked, you know. And I'm the first one to admit that, hey, I was wrong. And let's keep on working together, you know. There's sometimes that I make mistakes, they make mistakes, developer make mistakes. We can't just be fighting it and just be headbutting and say no, my way or the highway, you know. It's been going on too long, and not only here in Austin, but in our nation. And we need to really just sit down and start working together. And that's the only way that we're going to be able to keep Austin, East Austin affordable, and working with these developers to build us the affordability that we need.
Susanna.
Well, I think it's real important. Was I looking at community interest, or was it special interest? I think that that's the #1 benchmark. Was I looking at community interests or special interests? In other words, did I make my decision or my judgment, on the research on what neighborhoods said were impacting them, looking at the neighborhood plan, what is in the neighborhood, plan, what was their goals, their strategies for their neighborhood, and making sure that there was, again, that discussion. So one is to make sure that I personally visit that particular issue, that I sit down and talk with community, and that I sit down and talk with the developers, because a lot of times you have to have smaller committees to have those discussions and then be able to take them back to the larger group to talk to them. So I look at playing a more active role because I'm used to playing that role. I'm used to sitting down and talking with developers, going to our city council representatives, taking neighborhood members with me, because one of the important things is, do I really integrate the community in the issues? To me, that's number one. Was the community integrated into the issues? Did they have a say at the table? Did they have a discussion with the developers? To me, that's very important. If that discussion has not happened, that particular case is going back, because there is a process that the city has said that they must first meet with the most impacted or the contact team or the neighborhood association and work that out before it goes to the next stage. And then it alleviates a lot of things. So I'm looking at those benchmarks as, being involved in the process. Was the community active? Did they have a say? Were all the parties involved? And if they are, then I'm going to feel that I did my job, as the representative for District 3, because that's the most important. Did I do my job to represent the interests of the community versus the special interests?
So the city is pivoting to a new form of government, the 10-1 form of government, with 10 geographically drawn districts for the city council. I'm curious to hear from each of you. What do you think is the biggest challenge that the city is going to face as we transition to that form of government, and how would you overcome that challenge? Susanna first.
Well, I think that's going to be the biggest challenge is working with staff. Because staff has been used to having the at-large system at such a long time, and only specific people deciding the decisions or leading staff in a certain way. You're now going to have representatives from out Austin having that communication with the staff. So that's going to be very important. So the challenge is to make and help staff recognize that we're no longer at an at-large system, that we are now in a single-member district, and that we have to look at cases at the district level, and then, of course, look at cases that are city-wide. And so looking at staff, looking at the department heads, that's going to be another thing, is forming those relationships. I'm very fortunate because I've sat on so many boards and commissions and initiatives that I've had the opportunities to meet with all the top staff of all the different departments. And so those things are very important, because it is the department heads that then advise their staffers of how things are supposed to run. So I think it won't be as much as a challenge, because I've had that experience. I've worked within city government, and I've been able to work on a lot of different issues because I've been on a lot of boards and commissions. So I look at more as relationship building. That is going to be the thing. Can we build those relationships, and how fast should we build those relationships is very important.
Thank you. And Pio, the same question to you.
Well, I think one of few of the priorities that I'm going to take is, really look at the boards and commissions that we're going to have and form. There's 10 new members and one mayor, so that's 11 people that we're going to be filling out the commissions, the boards and commissions. And one of the things that really just gets to me about what's going on is that, we have these departments that are not talking to each other. And that's going to be one of my priorities, is that, we go to, and we go and look for a permit, or we have to, put in some development plans. They're saying, oh no, you got to go here, and then they say you got to go there. And you know, it's just so frustrating for people that or want to develop and get things done in Austin and to go through the permitting process. It's just, I mean, it's horrible. You know, we need to just, there's parks, you know, we got cultural center, park center, and they're all supposed to be doing the same things, but you know, you got so much conflicts going on. Everybody thinks that they're the ownership of this little program or department, and they don't want to communicate with the rest of the people, rest of the workers, city workers there. And one of my plans is to be just like the Hispanic Initiative, where you're getting all the departments to talk about this. They're all in the same, you know, doing the same kind of work, but they just do not communicate with each other. So I think that's one of the, you know, toughest priorities that we're going to be facing, because we really need to do those kind of things. We need to tell these permitting departments that, hey, you know, y'all need to talk to each other. You know, you don't be saying that, well, that's not our department. You got to go over here. And then the other one, we need to automate. You know, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to go online and filling out and get a permit. I mean, you're wasting all your time there at City Hall, I mean at the department there, the permit department. And it's like, I have an example of what I did. You know, I went to short-term rental.
So we're actually getting close to the end of our time,
Okay.
so I'm going to have to hop to our last questions. If I could just get a sentence from each of you on this one. At the end of your term, how will your constituents describe your leadership skills and qualities? A sentence from each of you. P.O., you first.
I think they're going to say that this is one person that, you know, I was able to go to his office, talk to him, and feel like, you know, he really felt like, you know, I was really concerned about his problem, and that he said, I really feel like, you know, he is really going to work on this solution.
All right, that's your sentence. Thank you, Susanna.
Well, I think that they're going to be very proud that they continue to support justice, freedom, and human rights. Is something that we've been working on for a long time. And they're going to make sure and be involved, continue to be involved. And so they're going to be happy that I integrated them into city government, and that they had a seat at the table, and that they had a voice at the table.
And that is all the time we have for tonight. Thanks to both of you, Susanna Almanza and Sabio Pio Renteria. All of the runoff conversations and our conversations with the newly elected candidates for Districts 2, 5, and 9 will be available on YouTube. Early voting in the runoff election starts December 1st. Election Day is December 16th. For KLRU, Leadership Austin, the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life, and KUT, I'm Jennifer Staten. Thanks so much for watching.
Support for Civic Summit comes from Google, a global technology leader focused on improving the ways people connect with information. And also by Texas Mutual Insurance, providing workers' compensation for Texas employers.
Sure, I can hear you now. Yeah, this is great. Mm-hmm. Sure, I'm going to read the top here. Hello, and thanks for joining us for Civic Summit, City Council Runoff Conversation, District 4. Okay. She'd like you all to do a microphone check, so Greg, you want to go first?
Sure. Check, check. Hi, I'm Greg. Can you hear me?
Hello, 1, 2, 3.
With a new form of government taking shape at City Hall and every seat up for grabs, Austin voters elected 2 new City Council members on November 4th and sent 16 council candidates, plus 2 vying for Austin mayor, to runoff elections. Tonight, beyond the rhetoric, we ask the remaining candidates what makes them the right person to lead their district and our city.
Support for Civic Summit comes from Google, a global technology leader focused on improving the ways people connect with information. And also by Texas Mutual Insurance, providing workers' compensation for Texas employers.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for Civic Summit, City Council Runoff Conversation District 4, a joint production of KLRU, Leadership Austin, KUT, and the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life. I'm Michael Kanan, publisher of the Austin Monitor. Coming up, we have 2 candidates running for Austin's District 4. You can join the conversation by using the hashtag CivicSummitD4. District 4 is a North Austin community bordering the Breaker Lane entrance to I-35. It runs all the way down just north of Rumberg Lane, down to just north of Rumberg Lane. On the east side, some parts touch DeSalle Road. On the west, it runs between Metric and Burnett Lane. This district is primarily composed of an older Hispanic population, while at the same time having one of the largest populations of kids 10 years old or younger. Our first candidate is Greg Casar. Greg is the son of Mexican immigrants and a native Texan. He currently works as a community organizer in Austin. The candidate running against him is Laura Presley. Laura has lived in Austin for the past 26 years. She's worked in the semiconductor industry as an engineer for 17 years. Thanks to both of you for being here. Our discussion tonight will focus on leadership. Consider this a job interview. We want to know what skills and qualities you would bring to City Hall. This discussion is not being conducted in an unofficial debate manner, but we're asking the candidates to be respectful of each other's time and limit their answers to about a minute. First question, which was shared with both candidates before tonight: what have you learned about yourself over the last 4 months campaigning that will help you govern? And we'll start with Greg.
Well, thanks so much for having us, Mike and KLRU. Something that I've learned while campaigning has been how folks are looking for a leader who listens. And while me and my team were really dedicated to talking to folks door to door, over 25,000 doors were knocked by myself and my team throughout this campaign. Something that I started doing less and less was just talking about my policy ideas or the vision that I might bring to the city, because I found that folks wanted much more to bring their vision forward. And where I connected most with constituents and everyday Austin residents was at the end of the conversation, when I'd scribble my cell phone number down on a piece of paper and hand it to them and let them know that they could give me a call on my cell phone. And I have learned that within our district we have so much talent, so many great ideas, so many hardworking, energetic people. I'll give you 2 brief examples. One is Pete Aikenhead, who lives in the northern end of District 4. In the early 60s, he moved back to his home state of Arkansas to fight the segregationists that had held on to the state government there. He worked as an organizer for years, and because of his hard work and the work of others, they ended segregation in that state, got universal kindergarten in that state, their first minimum wage in that state, and ended the poll tax. And now he lives in District 4, but has been felt unengaged from city government, and now he's a regular volunteer and someone who can really bring his years of experience to solving Austin's problems of today. And then my other friend, Jose, was someone that I've worked with for years at Workers Defense Project. At age 19, he was injured in a construction accident that almost took his life and almost ended his ability to provide for his young family. And I got the chance to work with Jose to connect him with the head of government affairs for Apple Incorporated, worldwide head of government affairs, and talk to him about if Apple was going to be building a new headquarters here in Austin, how important it was for those jobs to be safe jobs. And Apple stepped up and raised safety standards for all of their thousands of workers because of interactions with folks like Jose. And so I know that no one leader can solve the problems of District 4 or of our city. There's no simple answers or easy solutions, but as someone who listens and connects the talent and energy that exists within District 4 and across our city, folks that have too often been ignored at City Hall, I believe that we can begin to tip the scales by harnessing the great spirit we have in Austin. And so that's something that I've learned. I really want to be able to bring out in myself and bring out in others.
Thanks, Greg. Laura?
Yes, thank you for having us, and thank you for everybody's time this evening coming here. You know, District 4 is an amazing district, and the diversity is absolutely just off the chart, from religious groups to ethnic groups to political groups. And I think what is really important in District 4 is someone who can bring all these groups together in an inclusive manner. And that's one of the things I've done from a leadership standpoint. I've spent 17 years in the semiconductor industry. I've worked globally with companies and diverse populations across the world. So it's a challenge because you have to kind of extend yourself and be tolerant of a different kind of, perspective than your own. And so you have to have that open mind. And a lot of that is something that's not just automatic. One of the things that I learned about District 4 is it's amazing through the seasons of my life. I'm 51 years old, I have a PhD in chemistry, and I didn't start out that way. I came to Austin as a single mom. I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and so much I have in common with District 4 that I didn't really realize at a very deep level. I came to Austin, I was in absolute poverty. I came here as a single mom with my daughter to go to school to better my life, and moved up into industry and finished. I was a volunteer and board member of Safe Place, a battered women's shelter. The #1 crime issue in District 4 is domestic violence, and that is something that kind of brought back to me the stuff that I dealt with many 20-something years ago. And so all of these things coalesced, and just in the different stages that District 4 is in, I've been in my life. I think the other thing that I really learned was how distrusting the district, a lot of people in the district are of the city. They have a lot of issues with the city utilities, getting their water shut off, their electricity shut off by mistake. There was a woman I helped who had gotten her water turned off, and they had said she had tampered with the valve, and there was just a process the city had not followed to verify that she had done that. Her water was off for 2 months. Trying to work through the system with her, trying to get everything taken care of. And code issues. We have a lot of cultures in District 4, and each culture brings their own certain standards of what they think is appropriate, and the code is there to kind of normalize all of that, and a lot of miscommunication and issues with code issues in the district. I think what's needed in District 4 is someone who's very protective, someone that will stand up for the district and have high expectations for the district.
Okay, we're going to have you stop
there.
Okay,
thank you.
Let's move on to the next question. We'll start with you this time, Laura. What do you think leads to better outcomes for the city? Specific, concrete policy benchmarks, or more general governing philosophies of how a city should be run? Which do you favor and why?
I like the metrics.
Okay.
That's my background. I was a gross margin manager for a $1 billion networking business at Freescale Semiconductor. I've been an engineer. I've been a manager. Different roles I've played, and you really have to understand what the financial limitations are for the city budget. we don't have an infinite amount of money. There's no way. So you have to prioritize what happens and the policies and the projects that are, you know, that we vote in and as a city council. And so I believe metrics are very important. I think also understanding the struggles that people have, where you have a tactical component of being a city council member in the moment right now, what needs to be done, but also you have to set up kind of a runway for strategic, and you have to do both.
Great.
I definitely would favor putting forward and finding metrics that we can agree to, but understand that metrics sometimes have limitations. So I'll speak to 2 metrics that I think are very important in regards to equity that would benefit District 4 and other neglected parts of town. One, we have often set goals for how often there should be park space and green space within an area, but we oftentimes do not include in the metric how many people there are in each area and how often those folks have yards and green space in their own single-family dwellings. So, for instance, within District 4, we are very little park space, but that is even more exacerbated by the fact that many folks live in dense multifamily housing where they don't have access to green space within their own homes. And so I think there should be better metrics set for issues of how close you should be to green space, where retail and services should be, and where there should be grocery stores. But then, of course, there are places where metrics fail. For example, you can see that the median family income in Austin is growing, and oftentimes this is pointed to as a metric saying that incomes are rising or wages are rising, but the median family income or the average income does not take into consideration the fact that folks have stayed at the bottom for a long time, and importing large numbers of jobs with high salaries will obviously inflate the median and average incomes. And so we can't just look at metrics. We have to have a value system within which we filter all of the decisions we're making as a council. You know very well that the council often is dealing with 120 items any given Thursday. And so we can't have a metric for every single one of those, and the best we can do sometimes is have a strong set of values, but also be flexible enough to compromise with the value sets of other council members.
Okay. We'll move on to the next one. Hypothetical situation.
Oh, this is fun.
Always is. A developer is in conflict over a project with a local neighborhood group. The city staff prefers one solution. The neighborhood group prefers another. What skills will you use to resolve this and any other conflicts that will no doubt arise between competing interests? Greg.
Certainly. You know, we see these sorts of issues happen at council week after week. And I think what is critical is to work with our neighborhood organizations, particularly within our district, to make sure that they are as reflective of our community as possible. And I believe that through exhaustive conversation between the development interests and our neighborhood groups, that we can get to a better place than we have previously, because an at-large council didn't really have constituents. They've, you know, I won't quote the council member that said it. They said, you know, I didn't feel like I'm responsible particularly to anyone. And I think the council members should serve as mediators, and staff should serve to be able to walk neighborhood organizations through a process so that staff are not bringing forward proposals that are in conflict with the neighborhood's values. But in the end, as a council member, you have to make the final decision. And I would tend to put neighbors' interests first ahead of anyone else's. But of course, if there is no viable solution on the table, then you have to eventually sort of put your, make a decision, and sometimes that means making nobody happy. But that's just part of what the job of being a city council member is. And I would make sure that my values weren't compromised in any sort of decision in the end.
Laura.
Yes, most of the neighborhoods in Austin are governed by their neighborhood plans. So developers will come and propose a development. Either it can be consistent with the neighborhood plan and the future land use map. The future land use maps are codified into city code and city law. So really it governs what developers are permitted to do, because the neighborhood voted and the council voted these future land use maps into existence, and they're kind of what the bounds are. And but we've seen on the council that there have been many waivers and many changes to what the neighborhood plans and the future land use maps are, and that's where the rub is. You know, the council has been very easily influenced by developers and by waivers to certain zoning and codes. This is why we get gentrification, is because the council has upzoned certain districts. They have ignored the compatibility standards that are also city code. And so when you have that, you get gentrification, because you get upzoning and you get bigger, larger taxes go up, people move out. East Austin has seen this over and over. You've seen it in South Congress, you've seen it East Riverside, you've seen it in Manor, off of Manor Road where Miller is. So it's a big, big problem. I think the council needs to, this is why the 10-1 happened, because people are really frustrated and they're not happy with how the gentrification and all the issues. So I think compromise is needed. I think if the developer understands that they really have to work with the neighborhoods, there can be a give and take. And I think the neighborhoods are the ones that should drive it. And one other piece I want to talk about is, it's interesting down at City Hall that the development department is driving policy, and that is not appropriate. The council drives policy, and the neighborhood plans, the future land use maps drive kind of the progression of development. And we've seen this on the Austin, I'm on the Austin Neighborhoods Council, I'm on the Land Development Code Subcommittee, and we have been working with Code Next and trying to reel in the staff. A lot of people think the staff is just, you know, out of their bounds, and in some cases they are.
Okay. I'd like to get you all to talk a minute about compromise. Is there a situation that's appropriate for you, values, land use maps, whatever it's going to be, to compromise what you're bringing to City Hall? We'll start with, I believe it's your turn, Greg. I'm sorry, Laura, it's your turn.
Yeah. So my policy is going to be follow what the city code says, which is the future land use maps. Those things are codified into the city ordinances that the previous city councils have voted to approve those. And they define future development, future zoning, if the zoning is not currently the SF3, SF4, SF6 multifamily, you know, limited industrial, whatever, it is on the future land use map. So, you know, my policy would be to follow what was requested. You know, there are processes in place to update the neighborhood plans, and that can happen. So, I think it's really, the onus is on the developer to go to the neighborhoods and get their agreement if they want to go off of what the neighborhood plans and what the future land use maps already say.
Okay, Greg?
I do not think compromise is a dirty word, and it has been the way that I've gotten much of the work and advocacy that I've done at City Hall done. I've been really honored to be able to lead efforts and participate in efforts to change over 24 policies on the local level, and I'll give you an example of one. Over 4 years ago, I was tasked with leading an effort to pass an ordinance at the city level to guarantee workers that were working outside in the heat the right to a water break and to a rest break. And this was a nationally unprecedented push, but a UT study had shown that many folks building our beautiful downtown were not allowed to come off the scaffolds and take a drink of water. And there were serious interests on the other side pushing back. And while we did manage to pass the ordinance on a unanimous 7-0 vote, we did make compromises to make sure that those that were up in cranes or those that were taking part in some kinds of non-strenuous labor, that those compromises could be made. And we could have possibly passed it 6-1 or 5-2 without making those amendments or compromises. But it's important to make sure that those relationships stay strong and that we're understanding that there are going to be differences of opinion. As Sarah Eckhart's appointee on the Economic Development Task Force, I sat across the table from the Chamber of Commerce and from contractors associations while I was a workers advocate for months and months. And we managed to come to agreement on 11 out of 12 of the recommendations that we wrote up. And so I think that by understanding that we have more in common than we have different, and oftentimes in the city, I think with the new 10-1, we have an opportunity to sort of restart the conversation, get rid of some of the animosity between traditional interests at City Hall, and find places where we can compromise and move forward.
Okay. Greg and Laura, you each have experience taking issues of personal importance to City Hall. What did you learn from those experiences? What from your past activism translates well to your prospective new job? And what doesn't fit so well? Greg, I think it's your turn to start.
Certainly. So a recent initiative that I worked on was reforming our city's economic development program to make sure that not just those in high-tech jobs, but those working with their hands in construction and in maintenance would also get a share of Austin's prosperity, and make sure that we had decent wages with decent benefits for those who are working for incoming companies as Austin grows. And for us to get that done, I had, there were, of course, folks like the Chamber of Commerce being on the other side of this. It was a difficult task to complete. And so I had to get to know and meet all of the democratic organizations in town, the environmental groups in town, responsible business owners. We got over 40 organizations to sign on to this. And getting to know those folks on the outside, as an advocate was so helpful, I believe, for future work as a council member, because I've already developed those relationships, and many of those groups have endorsed my candidacy. Over 40 organizations also have endorsed my candidacy, so that we can begin to build a working relationship on the inside as well as on the outside. And so I think that was very helpful, but I do understand that my relationship is going to have to change as a council member. And so that's something that I look forward to working on, and look forward to building relationships with the city staff on the inside.
Okay, Laura.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Sorry, I'm going to have to flip back here real fast. You both have personal experience taking issues of personal importance to City Hall. What did you learn from those experiences? What from your past activism translates to well to your prospective new job, and what doesn't fit so well?
Yeah. There's a lot of things I've taken to City Hall over the last, 3 or 4 years, and I think the one that I'm most proud of is saving $4 million at City Hall with regard to fee waivers. And there was I think it was a $6 million fee waiver that was going to be on the consent agenda on the council. And I don't know if everybody understands consent agenda, but it's an agenda where you just go ahead, everybody votes on 100 items at one time. And so you don't really get to see the individual details of these 100 items, spending items in some cases, that the council's approving. So there's one item, it was a $6 million fee waiver to the UT Seton Medical School. And it was going to cost us as taxpayers to pay, these were fee waivers for hookups for water and different road usages and everything. And so I'm like, why are we giving a fee waiver when Central Health just raised our taxes for this project of the medical school? So I spoke on it. We had pulled it from consent. Cheryl Cole and Bill Spellman did a phenomenal job. They pulled it. And we had Ora Houston speak, and also Paul Robbins speak, and educated the council that this fee waiver of $1.5 million was going to have to be paid by the ratepayers. You know, our water department is, we're struggling financially, so we saved $1.5 million. And Bill Spellman made the comment, well, if I knew the previous fee waiver we did several months ago, ratepayers were going to have to absorb those costs, I would have never supported that. And so what the council did, they went back and $2.5 million more they cut from another fee waiver they had approved months ago. So it was $4 million saved in about 20 minutes. And I'm saying, put me on that council for more than 20 minutes. Imagine what we could do. And but that's a big deal, especially with our utility rates are just skyrocketing. We as citizens are paying for these subsidies. The subsidies to these corporations are driving our affordability issues. There are things that go through this council on the consent agenda every week. There needs to be somebody there as a watchdog saying no and protecting us.
Okay. The City of Austin is involved in multiple regional entities, multiple regional agreements. What leadership skills will you rely on as you interact with the city's regional partners? Laura?
Again, I think it goes back to inclusiveness and be able to listen to all sides, even if you don't agree. And you have to get everybody's perspective on the table. And I agree with the compromise. You have to give and take a little bit. But I just think you have to be able to listen to everyone and everyone's perspective. There's always going to be positive and negatives. The other piece that I really would like to do from a metric standpoint, we have projects throughout the city that are multi-million dollars. I would like to add the component of how many Austinites, taxpayers, et cetera, across the city, these projects are going to impact, like a number, a metric of dollars per person. And I think that would be an interesting way to weigh out conflicting priorities.
Okay, Greg.
Sure. So we do have political differences oftentimes with other folks in the region, and I think while it's important for us to be as collaborative as possible with regional entities, we also have to understand that we are the economic driving force of the Central Texas region and act like it. And so I'll give you an example. Our utility rates, folks in Westlake Hills and other parts just outside of Austin are paying lower utility bills, even though they're traditionally more affluent neighborhoods that are they're putting more strain on our natural resources, are paying lower utility rates than many of the struggling inner city customers here in Austin, and we had to negotiate that during our last rate case. And I believe that it's really important that we be as collaborative as possible in our region, but also understand that that we are responsible to those that need help the most first, and that more affluent suburbs and other regions rely on Austin's economic prosperity and on the working people of areas like District 4 for their own prosperity. And so we need to make sure that we can compromise, but we shouldn't be flimsy at the negotiating table either.
Okay, we got time for one more, and I'm afraid I'm gonna have to limit you guys to a sentence each on it, so here we go. At the end of your term, how will your constituents describe your leadership skills and qualities? Greg, you're first. One sentence.
Oh, only one sentence. I'm out then. My goal in running has been not just a policy solution, but I hope that folks will feel that I've helped elevate the voices of those people that are traditionally ignored or forgotten at City Hall.
Okay, Laura?
She listened and she helped us improve our affordability, and we have a 20% homestead exemption and our utility rates went down.
Long sentences, but we'll take them. That's all the time we have for tonight. Thanks to both of you. All of the runoff conversations and our conversation with the newly elected candidates for Districts 2, 5, and 9 will be available on YouTube. Early voting in the runoff election starts December 1st. Election day is December 16th. For KLRU, Leadership Austin, the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life, and KUT, I'm Michael Kanan. Thanks so much for watching. I think you gotta wait a minute.
Support for Civic Summit comes from Google, a global
clear. Thank you
technology
guys very
leader
much.
focused on improving
Good
the
job.
ways people connect with information. And also by Texas Mutual Insurance, providing workers' compensation for Texas employers.
Hello, and thanks for joining us. We're not going. Good. Oh, I'm good.
All right.
Mic
Don.
checks. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Don Zimmerman, District. Candidate mic check. Good.
Jimmy.
Ready? Jimmy Flanagan, running for District 6.
With a new form of government taking shape at City Hall and every seat up for grabs, Austin voters elected 2 new City Council members on November 4th and sent 16 council candidates, plus 2 vying for Austin mayor, to runoff elections. Tonight, beyond the rhetoric, we ask the remaining candidates what makes them the right person to lead their district and our city.
Support for Civic Summit comes from Google, a global technology leader focused on improving the ways people connect with information. And also by Texas Mutual Insurance, providing workers' compensation for Texas employers.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for Civic Summit, City Council Runoff Conversation District 6, a joint production of KLRU, the Leadership Austin, KUT, and the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life. I'm Michael Kanan, publisher of the Austin Monitor. For the next half hour, we will be speaking to the candidates from District 6, Jimmy Flanagan and Don Zimmerman. And if you would like to be a part of the conversation, please join us on Twitter using hashtag CivicSummitD6. District 6 encompasses the edge of northwest Austin toward Cedar Park and east of the Travis-Williamson County line. District 6 is primarily Anglo, with most of the population ranging from 24 to 34 years old. The district is one of the largest in population and is the home of several tech sites, including 3M's development plant. To my left is Jimmy Flanagan. Jimmy has lived in Austin since he was a student at the University of Texas. While still a student, he started a business called Site Street, which helped students or organizations build their websites. He is also the founder of the Northwest Austin Coalition. Running against him, Don Zimmerman. Don has a BS and MS in mechanical engineering from Texas A&M. He's been a resident of District 6 Canyon Creek since 2000 and founded the Travis County Taxpayers Union in 2002. Our discussion tonight will focus on leadership. Consider this a job interview. We want to know what skills and qualities you would bring to Austin City Hall. The discussion is not being conducted in an official debate manner, but we are asking candidates to be respectful of each other's time and limit their answers to about a minute. First question, which was shared with both of you candidates before tonight. What have you learned about yourself over the last 4 months of campaigning that will help you govern? Jimmy, you first.
Well, I think what I've certainly learned is, having lived in District 6 nearly my whole adult life, and at the same time working across the city for a variety of issues, I've learned how District 6 is the same and how it's different. And there are many issues that District 6 uses different language to talk about, but at the end of the day, it's the same issue. And there are a lot of battles that people think are going to come. And ultimately, and I have said this to folks all over the district, if we walk into City Hall with our fists clenched, we're not going to get anything solved in District 6. If we focus on the ways that we're different, we'll get nothing. We have to focus on the ways that we're the same. And there are a large number of issues. Certainly traffic is the most important issue that we face in District 6, and I've spent many, many years working on that issue through the Austin Chamber of Commerce. And it's really important to understand how those issues are the same across the city. And the decade that I've spent through the Gay and Lesbian Chamber, through the Austin Chamber, through the Northwest Austin Coalition, being a small business owner, that those tools become very valuable when it comes to finding those other 5 votes. District 6 residents don't often get down to City Hall. It's very difficult. I've called it a good citizen tax in order to advocate. And it's important to realize a single council member isn't a president. They don't get to, by fiat, make decisions in or out of the district. You have to find ways to collaborate. You have to find those coalitions. And that's what I've spent my life's work doing.
Okay, thank you. Don?
I think the first thing you need to learn when you're a candidate is it's not about you. So what I've learned in this campaign for District 6, talking to as many people as I have, it's really not about me personally. I think this is about the rule of law. And my leadership style will be centered around that. When I was president of my MUD, we attempted to negotiate with the city of Austin. A lot of people came before me in that neighborhood. They tried to form relationships, they tried to mediate, they tried to reason together, and none of that worked. And when I got elected as my MUD president, it became obvious to me as an engineer and a problem solver that we needed to go to litigation. We needed to have respect for the rule of law. So I think my leadership style and what I've learned talking to so many residents, I think I could do very, very well in District 6 because I focus not on political relationships, but on fidelity to the rule of law.
Okay, I think that leads in perfectly to the next question. Don, there's a tone of uncompromisingness, not a word, uncompromising, a lack of willingness to compromise there. And this election season has been no different, just sort of going back over your history. For you, do the concepts of leadership and mitigation mix?
Absolutely, absolutely. I've been involved in a number of mediation cases, of course. But let me ask you, maybe I can put out a simple case of what I mean by compromise and how that is a bad word. Imagine how frustrated our people would be if one of our citizens called the police and said, I have a robbery in progress. Police come over. Policeman looks at the robber. Policeman looks at the homeowner. He says, tell you what, let's have a compromise. The robber takes half of your property and you keep half. Compromise. And I would say to that, that's not a compromise, that's an outrage, because there's a violation of the rule of law. So what I seek to do is to, when there are gray areas, because there always are, when there are gray areas, let's ask, why is this area gray? Let's seek for the truth of the matter, and let's see how the rule of law applies, and let's apply it fairly.
Okay. Jimmy, Don's victory may have been slim, but there it is. And a baseline argument might start with the idea that at least 1/4 of the population of your district are calling for his style of leadership. If elected, how would you represent that segment of the population?
Well, I think it's important to note that there were 15,000 voters in the district, and we did not reach 15,000 voters as candidates. Okay. There were small forums, there were, at most 200 people showing up to a forum. And the folks that I've spoken to in the district who voted for other candidates besides myself have since apologized because they didn't take the time to investigate the candidates. And once they did, once they looked into my leadership style and my leadership experience and those of my opponents, they've pulled yard signs out, they've promised to vote in that way in the runoff. Because ultimately you can't govern by lawsuit. It's not a realistic approach. You can't sue APD in order to fix a property crime problem, and you can't sue LCRA to fill the lakes, and you can't sue TxDOT to build a road.
Okay, I want to push you a little bit on it because you're suggesting you didn't quite answer the question. If elected, how would you represent the
Sure.
portion of the population?
Sure. Well, I'm the only candidate in the race that went to every forum, responded to every questionnaire, went to every meeting. I went to partisan ones, issue ones, neighborhood ones, and at every single point, it became very clear that I have not only the skills, the knowledge on the issues that we face at City Hall, but the skills to actually bring results to District 6. And I have supporters on both sides of the partisan divide. I have endorsements from groups that contradict the other groups. Because ultimately, it's not that people are looking at me to say, well, does he agree with me? It's they look at me to say, that's the guy who can get stuff done and we can work with him.
Okay. Next question, sort of along the same theme. The possibility exists that this incoming council will play a host to a wider variety of political ideology than has been on council before. How will you work with your new colleagues to ensure that the body isn't sidetracked? Jimmy?
Well, this is not about partisanship. And I have, from the very beginning, made it clear that I'm not interested in playing partisan games. I'm not interested in picking a side. City issues are nonpartisan issues. There is not Republican traffic or Democratic traffic. There is not a conservative lake and a liberal lake. These are issues that we all share. And the solutions, more often than not, are the same. You take Anderson Mill Road in the middle of the district. I don't care what your political party is, you're tired that only half of it's been fixed. And the half closest to 183 hasn't been updated like the other ends of that road. And there are so many other issues you can speak to that have nothing to do with partisanship, and that's been a commitment I've made since the beginning of the race. It's why I attended Republican forums and Democratic forums. Like I said, I'm the only candidate to do that, and that is how I intend to lead, with bringing in all ideas and making sure that the ideas we use are the best ones.
Don, same question to you.
Well, I'm going to bring a fiscally conservative view. I've knocked on many doors, as has Jimmy, and Jimmy's right. Technically, it is a nonpartisan race here. But the fact is we do have some views that are divergent. And there are some mutually exclusive options on the table. We cannot simultaneously lower property taxes and also increase them. So the fiscal conservatives, especially in the suburbs, feel they've been overtaxed, underrepresented. They need tax relief. To do that, we're going to have to cut the budget and lower taxes. Now, that's not going to make happy a lot of the people we have that want taxes raised because they want more services out of their city government. So again, my leadership style is to come in and say, look, we're going to live in a Democrat city. That is the majority vote here. And the Democrat position has been for decades, more regulation and more taxes. So it's going to be difficult for the minority of new city council members that are fiscal conservatives. It is going to be challenging for them, but I think there is a way to do it. One of the things I plan to do is focus on the transportation problem as an engineer in Western Travis County. And that certainly is a nonpartisan issue. Okay, let's move on from this basic topic. Here's a hypothetical situation. A developer is in conflict over a project within the local neighborhood group. City staff prefers one solution. The neighborhood group prefers another. What skills will you use to resolve this and any other conflicts that will no doubt arise between competing interests? Don, your turn to go first. Great question, but one person that was left out was the person who purchased the property and wants to do the project. I think the question was posed between the bureaucratic interest, right, and also the neighborhood groups that are already there. But what about the person who bought the property and has a plan and a goal to do a development, build more houses, businesses, whatever it is? This is something we obviously can't answer in a 1-minute response.
Oh, we've got a little more than a minute, please.
But just to say, ideologically, what I'd like to see happen is more respect for property rights. And so what happens is you end up with a discrepancy or a conflict in property rights between the people that have already lived there. They've lived under zoning, maybe it's single-family homes or whatever it might be. They have a reasonable expectation that the neighborhood should stay that way. Then you have property rights of, say, a developer that comes in and buys up some land. Well, maybe he wants to create some density. He wants to do something different with the property. Well, he's a property owner, but so are the people that already live there. So I see the city's role, government's role, and the judiciary's role in mediating these disputes. How do we balance the demands, the just demands between property owners that are already there under zoning and a new property owner who's bought property who wants a different development? That's a mediation exercise in my book. Okay. And it shouldn't be under the control of unelected bureaucrats.
Okay, thanks. Jimmy?
Well, to answer the question, this is about being partners. This is not about going into those conversations as adversaries. And I think we've seen that a lot at City Hall, where the default position by staff, the default position by neighborhoods, the default position by developers has been, this is going to be a battle and we're going to fight. Instead of being partners, instead of neighborhoods understanding that growth is coming. We've spent more than a decade on this misconception that you can stop growth. You can't stop growth. You have to manage it. You have to plan it. And you have to be partners with the people who are doing it. Otherwise, what you end up with is growth in Leander and Cedar Park and Round Rock, and then those people driving on Austin roads that Austin taxpayers have to pay for. So this is about not about letting it all go to lawsuit or arbitration or mediation. This is about starting at the beginning of the process and making sure that things are done in an era of collaboration and partnership. And because we're going to 10-1, because we're going to geographic representation, we have a unique opportunity to change that tone. If this wasn't a change and it was just one new council member coming into an existing system, you might argue that that was impossible to change. But because we're going to have these new voices and these new perspectives, we have this opportunity to get it done.
Okay. How will you increase civic engagement and interaction with your office? Jimmy, your turn to go first.
This is all about civic engagement and communication. In fact, there were many forums and questionnaires that said, what are you going to do in your first 100 days? What's the first law you're going to pass, the first ordinance? I said, I'm not going to pass any ordinances in the first 100 days. Folks in District 6 aren't even being told what's on the books now. We have to reach out and you have to build those lines of communication so that when the next battle comes, when the next ordinance comes, when the next thing comes, District 6 residents are informed, that they can advocate through their council member or at City Hall if they're able to get there. It's entirely about communication, and not just neighborhood groups, but businesses and the small businesses, PTAs, churches. This is the premise of the Northwest Austin Coalition group that I founded. Was after we did some advocacy on mapping, we said, well, look, we've got to keep this going. There's stuff happening at City Hall, and that information never gets past the Arboretum. So I kept those meetings going month after month after month, and bringing out APD and Code Next and transportation and water and neighborhood partnering, so that folks in District 6 could understand what was going on at City Hall, so then we could be all, as a community, be good advocates on those issues.
Okay, Don.
It is a great question, and this one has a clear answer for me. Many, many years ago, I went down to City Hall to protest some of the Patriot Act items that went in. And I think the Patriot Act under the Bush administration was asking for librarians to effectively spy on library customers as to what books they were reading. I went down to the City Council to testify. It was on the agenda at maybe 2:30. I ended up giving a chance to have 3 minutes at about 1 o'clock in the morning. And that stuff happens all the time. So I think what needs to happen to improve civic participation is to change the way people come before the council. We need to have better scheduling, and we need to have time slots where people can come in and testify. I think it's ridiculous that, you know, we have a meeting, an all-day meeting, the agenda is not clear, people can come in at 10 o'clock, they wait 8 hours to talk for 3 minutes. That's how you kill civic participation. We have an individual, Bill Oakey, has been in the area here for decades, and back in the 1980s, he came up with a terrific proposal that would change the system, right, and allow people to set appointments when they could come and speak before the council. That was proposed 30 years ago. I propose that we implement that as soon as possible in the new 10 line.
Okay. With so many new faces on the council, many of you will be learning the ropes of governing the city, while at the same time learning the issues. How will you lead while learning, Don?
That is another great question. I would have to go back to my engineering background, where they dumped a big pile of technical books, some of which were so complicated I never did comprehend them. You have to work very, very, very hard. You have to put in a lot of hours. You have to study very, very diligently. I think the other thing that would help would be to bring in past city council members. Jackie Goodman was, I thought, a very good council member. She helped me on a lot of issues. I think we can go to past council members, obviously. We can also look to some other cities that already have geographic representation. We can get ideas from them, but it's going to be the biggest challenge, as you said, to try to learn what you need to learn, adjust to the new system. It's going to be drinking from the proverbial fire hose.
Thank you, sir. Jimmy?
I don't necessarily agree that you need to bring in old council members. The voters made it clear they didn't like the old system. I think we have an opportunity, because it's new, to invent a system that works for the current city and think about how we want to govern into the future. You know, learning while you're on the job is something every council member does. Even the ones in the old system had to do it. And you know, I've spent more than a decade of my life working on city issues. It's been my primary focus as a small business owner and a Chamber of Commerce leader. I have the experience to start governing right away. This is not something that I have to do this huge, ridiculous learning curve on day one. This is how we're going to govern in 10-1. It's going to be because the voters said, we don't trust the old system. We want geographic representation, and we want to make sure that representation can work together to solve problems. And if we end up in a situation where we're either relying upon the old way, we won't have fulfilled the voters' will. And if we wait around for everybody to get up to speed on every issue, that's not going to get it done. And I think what you'll find are different council members in this new system having more experience in one area than another. Certainly my primary area of experience is small businesses and transportation, and I intend to take a leadership role on those issues. Okay, thanks. Let's pull back and talk a little bit more about the region. As you both may be aware, the city has a number of regional partnerships with a number of regional entities. How will you, what leadership skills will you use when you interact with these folks? Let's start with you, Jimmy. I think it's your turn. Well, it's really about maintaining this collaboration and communication and nonpartisan perspective. District 6 has a very unique role in working regionally because we're in 2 counties, basically evenly split between Williamson County and Travis County. And when it comes to especially solving transportation and water issues, it takes a regional collaboration to get it done. And if you're talking about bringing in Williamson County Commissioners Court, we've got similar constituents. You know, when you're a citywide council member, you're not necessarily thinking about it that way. You're thinking about the folks that voted in that city election, which is primarily not the folks in Williamson County. So we have an opportunity to really bridge that gap because we have shared constituents, we have shared issues. We're seeing the same clogged roads because the ones driving to Georgetown are driving on that same Palmer Lane that my folks are driving to Apple down the road. So the leadership skills is really about removing partisanship and making sure that when we're talking to a Democratic-controlled Commissioners Court in Travis and a Republican-controlled Commissioners Court in Williamson, that District 6 gets to be the nonpartisan bridge that's focused on solutions. Okay, Don?
I would agree, and I would like to be appointed to that Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority. I do have a deep technical background. I have a problem-solving orientation. So you talk about my leadership style, it is to drive towards a good solution. So the traffic problem here it is a very complex problem. When you look at the cost of new roads, the problems with right-of-way, the issues, environmental issues, and the desire of people to preserve their neighborhoods and some scenic views in certain places. This is a very, very complex system problem to figure out how to get the road expansion we need to relieve congestion. So I would really appreciate, and I will seek some position on some of these boards and then cooperate in the region to help solve the traffic problems. And I think I'm qualified for that.
I think you've both mentioned traffic as an issue. Let's think a little bit about the failure of the rail bond, and there's I think there's probably a lot of bruised folks out there in the community. How are you going to work with your new council colleagues to sort of to heal what happened there and to move forward with regard to transportation? Don, you're up.
Well, I appreciate getting a chance to go first. I was strongly opposed to the urban rail system. One of the technical arguments I made is, in 2014, it's not a good idea to go back to the 1800s for technology in transporting people. The railroads are still good for moving aggregates, petroleum products, shipping containers. There are some things that rail are very, very good for. Moving people is not one of them. So I'm going to remain on this policy objective of getting the roads expanded and resist these future proposals for rail. The rail has not worked in many cities where it's been put in. There was a big Statesman article about Portland, Oregon. It documented how Portland had been building rail for decades, for many decades. They have very extensive rail system, and they noted that ridership had actually decreased. It was around 9% decades ago, but it had decreased over time to around 7%. So the arguments we've been hearing policy-wide that if you build it, they will come, and if you build out the rail system, more people, it hasn't panned out. So I want to resist that and keep emphasizing roads.
Okay. So how are you going to work with those folks that are probably not going to agree with you, and there might be a lot of them out there?
Ask them to help us get the roads fixed.
Okay. Jimmy,
this is what we need to do.
Jimmy, you want to take it?
Well, I served on the Austin Chamber's Transportation Committee, and so I saw Prop 1 develop from the very beginning. And right as the bond language came out and we finally got to see what was going to be on the ballot, and I came out against it, as did all of the District 6 candidates. I got a lot of pressure from folks at the Chamber and folks in development and other folks who were very pro Prop 1. And I told them point blank, this is not about some ideological opposition to rail. This is about a bad plan. And you can't tell me over and over and over again, you could never do rail on Lamar, you could never do rail on Lamar, and then put it on the system plan. You don't solve a transportation problem with a single line of rail. And you don't solve a transportation problem with rail in low-dense areas. And that same article and the same studies that I've seen show that rail works where there's density to support it. And what we have to think about is a holistic approach to traffic. And it's not going to be one line of rail or a system plan haphazardly put together to try to come up, oh yeah, we had a system plan all along. That's not realistic. And the fact that I've worked with these transportation advocates, and in fact, the bond measure, the Prop 1 bond measure, before it was finalized, I'm the person who got Palmer Lane and 2222 and 620 included in that bond measure. And unfortunately, everything else they put into it was terrible. You can't spend $18 million not even building a road, but just planning the roads, which is why we have the problem we have in District 6. This is about having that experience, being in the trenches with these folks, and knowing that you could never build enough roads to solve the traffic problem in Austin. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to build $1 billion rail line.
Okay. Who outside of local city government do you admire for their leadership qualities, and why? Jimmy, I think you're first.
Wow. I have a lot of folks who have passed away who I really idolize. Betty Naylor was a big mentor for me.
Then you got to step outside of city politics.
Well, she was legislative.
Fair enough.
She was legislative. She didn't really get involved in city politics. Certainly not when I knew her. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of good leadership qualities. But to be perfectly frank, I have spent my life working on issues at the city level, and those are the folks that I know, and those are the folks that I built relationships with. And there's a lot of good folks that I see in community groups and nonprofit organizations in Austin that have excellent leadership skills. And you can see the success of these organizations, arts organizations. I mean, what Zach Scott's put together there is a pretty amazing achievement. And it's not just a single leader. that gets those things done. It's the team you build around yourself, and it's the way that you bring a community along with you.
Okay, Don.
I'm glad Betty Naylor's name came up because in the oddest of circumstances, I actually met her in a Bible study in the office of the former speaker, Billy Clayton, the Texas Aggie. So this was, you know, Austin is weird because you've got me, a Ron Paul Republican, Betty Naylor, Aggie, Billy Clayton, and we're all sitting around studying the Bible right across the street from the Capitol. How strange is that? But I would have to say my political figure would have to be Dr. Ron Paul. I heard about Ron Paul when I was in high school in the 1970s. And what I admired most about him, integrity to the Constitution. And you would have these votes in Congress where there would be 434 in favor, 1 opposed. And it would be Dr. Ron Paul. And he would say, well, this issue's not in the Constitution. It's a good idea, but we don't have any legal authority to do this under the Constitution. I'm voting no. So I really appreciated and admired him.
Okay. Got one more question. You guys are going to have 30 seconds to answer it. At the end of your term, how will your constituents describe your leadership skills and qualities? Don, I think you go first.
What I would hope they would say is that I kept my campaign promises. I would hope that they would say, we have a relationship with Don because he listened to us and he did what he said he was going to do. And I hope they could say, you know, our traffic is moving a whole lot better since we elected Zimmerman.
Okay. Jimmy?
In one sentence, I think it would be working with Jimmy Flanagan on solving the issues that we faced in District 6 has not only been a pleasure, but it's been effective because he's been aggressive when he needs to be, he's been collaborative when it was necessary, and he got the job done at the end of the day.
Okay. That's all the time we have for tonight. Thanks to both of you. All of the runoff conversations and our conversation with the newly elected candidates for Districts 2, 5, and 9 will be available on YouTube. Early voting in the runoff election starts December 1st. Election day is December 16th. For KLRU, Leadership Austin, the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life, and KUT, I'm Michael Kanan. Thanks so much for watching.
Support for Civic Summit comes from Google, a global technology leader focused on improving the ways people connect with information. And also by Texas Mutual Insurance, providing workers' compensation for Texas employers.